And is also to be avoided in cases of high-risk pregnancy, for example, when there is a geriatric mother.
Right. Excellent.
You would think that with Daniel Cleaver finally out of the picture, Bridget Jones as a franchise would finally take the time to focus on the romance and less on the love triangle that nobody wants or buys into. But alas, is it Bridget Jones if we are not going once again on this hopeless joyride that absolutely no one wants? Now, I will be the first to admit it that of the 3 movies we've gotten so far, or that I've watched so far in the Bridget Jones franchise, this is most certainly my favorite by a long mile. Like I mentioned in last week's video where I talked about how convinced I am that the Bridget Jones movies are nothing more than a way to highlight how dating is a humiliation ritual, particularly for women, with the way the films kept incessantly making Bridget the butt of all the jokes. They turn things down a lot in this film, and I definitely think that it did help me with my enjoyment of it. Bridget isn't a walking case of social, career, and romantic ineptitude in this one, and I did find some of the hilarious moments funny. However, they still did not lose the annoying love triangle, and they are very much still obsessed with painting Mark Darcy as this epitome of Bridget's greatest love that just has me rolling my eyes and wondering why, oh why, are we still stuck on this merry-go-round when I thought we were already done with it after the marriage proposal we got at the end of Bridget Jones' Edge of Reason. Alas, this is not the case. But before we get into that, you know how we do it. Let's dive right into the synopsis of the film. It's Bridget's 43rd birthday. Yes, people. With Bridget Jones's baby, we've officially spent a decade with Bridget, and considering the fact that Bridget Jones' Edge of Reason took place 8 weeks after Bridget Jones's diary, or rather, it started 8 weeks after Bridget Jones's diary. Then of the 2 sequels to the first movie, this is the longest we've gone in between the story. And as such, a lot has changed. Bridget, like I said earlier, is now 43, blowing out a lonely candle on a store-bought cupcake, alone in our apartment, listening initially to the sad and mopey music that we know her for, before she skips right on over to funky hip-hop bits, which, you know what, I actually kind of dig. Anyway, Bridget, as she tells us, is all alone on yet another birthday and takes us back to how exactly she got there. It all started, as it always does, with Daniel Cleaver and Mark Darcy. You see, Bridget, her friends, and a ton of young, skinny models all show up at Daniel's funeral. Turned out that his plane crashed and nobody was able to find his body. Unfortunately, if, like me, you spend the entire scene pausing on people's faces and wondering where the television crew are, then thank you. It seems like I'm not alone in this, because even though Bridget has now worked her way up to television producer, a job that she's finally competent at, thank the gods, minus a few hiccups, of course. But yeah, although she's now gone up at work and her former boss is still dreaming of one day being able to get into her pants, something that hasn't happened yet, thank the gods. However, I kept wondering if the film was just going to skip over Daniel's brief detour into broadcasting that we got in the second film. For those who are wondering, yes, they did just skip it. It's back now in publishing. Hooray! Anyways, I was saying, they hold Daniel's funeral, sans body. Bridget shows up alone for said funeral, and my thought initially was, of course she's alone. Mark is probably at home with the kids. Ain't no way he's coming to Daniel's funeral. There isn't even a body for him to pummel to death. But then Mark shows up and my brain went, what? With his wife. And my brain went, excuse me, what the fuck? Because yes, in Bridget Jones's Baby, we are informed that in the 10 years that we left these 2 lovebirds alone, they split up. Not like it stops Mark from giving Bridget the soulful "I'm still in love with you" stare, whilst Bridget, who's very much single, now older and has lost the weight she's been so obsessed about from the very first movie, tries her hardest not to look at him and his wife. Anyway, Bridget shows up to work on the morning of her birthday and crushes things. She is calm, put together, and professional, except for when she takes a phone call at work, of course, and unwittingly feeds her colleague and very good friend Miranda the wrong cues during Miranda's interview that she's conducting on air. Because, you know, Would it really be Bridget if she doesn't screw things up just a little bit? But she's older now, so she bounces back and handles things splendidly till the end. She's, of course, excited to spend her birthday with her friends, except everyone bails on her because they either all have kids now or are in the process of adopting one, hence why she spends her birthday alone. Miranda, though, is all up for her to accept life as a single child-free woman, and they spend the weekend at a retreat. Or, at least that's what Bridget thought it would be. It isn't. It's a music festival. And Miranda's goal is for Bridget to hook up with the first guy she meets. The first guy she meets turns out to be Patrick Dempsey. I mean Jack, who meets her in the traditional Bridget Jones meet cute fashion after she's gotten stuck in mud, and he rescues her. She leaves without giving him her name, and after she and Miranda have a blast that night that also involves running into Ed Sheeran, except they had no idea it was Ed Sheeran, Bridget, who is tipsy at this point, finds her way to their tent and starts stripping. Unfortunately for her, she had entered the wrong tent. It's Jack's tent. And now they've had their second introduction. They proceed to have a one-night stand. The next morning, Bridget, now stone cold sober, wakes up alone in the bed. She grabs her clothes and leaves. Moments later, Jack shows up with breakfast in hand, but Bridget is long gone. Bridget, though, really does have to run, as she's due to attend one of her oldest friends, Jude's baby's christening as the godmother. She makes it to the church only to learn that whilst Jude had asked her to be her baby's godmother, Jude's husband had asked Mark to be the baby's godfather. So there she is at the christening with Mark Darcy, both of them trying and failing not to look into each other's eyes. There's some Gangnam style dancing, which, not going to lie, ages this film a lot. And when the two have a moment, Bridget pulls back, reminding Mark that he is married. Except Mark isn't. He and his wife, now ex-wife Camilla, are getting a divorce, and the only reason why she'd followed him to Daniel Cleaver's funeral was to provide moral support, which makes zero sense when you think about it because, hey, Mark Darcy, every Bridget Jones film has always had a scene of you beating the crap out of Daniel Cleaver. Anyway, that's the story the film decides to go with, so we roll with it. Bridget and Mark kiss and they later hook up. Except when Mark wakes up, Bridget is gone. She's left him a note telling him that she can't really do this, as he's never really been there for her and she's not about to be stuck in the same cycle they were in back when they were together. Bridget, of course, thinks this is the end of it, except a positive pregnancy test shows her that it very much is not. Especially when she realizes that having sex with both Jack and Mark within days of each other means she can't say for certain who the father of a baby could be. Her doctor, Dr. Rawlins, played by the delectable Emma Thompson. What can I say? I love me an older woman. Anyway, Dr. Rawlins mentions that they can run a DNA test on the baby via said baby's amniotic fluid if Bridget is able to get her hands on a DNA sample. Which is kind of tough for Bridget because she has no way to contact Jack. Her friends, though, point out through that a process of elimination can help her determine who her baby daddy is, i.e. if she's able to get the sample from one of the men and it's not a match, it automatically indicates who the baby daddy is, which is a brilliant plan in my book and once again makes zero sense that she couldn't just show up at Mark's law chambers and grab a sample there. Anyway, her friends help her discover Jack's identity. Turns out that he is this famous mathematician who's used maths for some compatibility website he has and has become a billionaire as a result of it. Bridget decides to undertake the most convoluted plan because once again, it's the Bridget Jones way, where she brings Jack on as a guest on the show she's producing in a bid to kill two birds with one stone. Her new boss is a young badass who is itching to fire people, and Bridget, soon to be single mother, definitely needs the job and knows that getting Jack on for the hard news interview segment will be a score and her boss would be impressed. Plus, she's able to get a ton of DNA samples thanks to her friends also working in the station, namely the hair and makeup stylist. And when Jack is on, Bridget goes off a bit on a tangent, asking personal questions until Jack spots her. She tries to escape, he corners her, brings up her leaving that morning, and Bridget blots out the fact that she's pregnant. An information that throws off Jack, and of course, she doesn't mention the fact that there's a 50% chance he might not be the father. Bridget takes Jack's DNA sample to Dr. Rollins, where she goes in for her very first ever ultrasound. Seeing the baby has her happy and determined to protect the fetus, and so seeing the giant has needle that Dr. Rollins wants to use on her baby for the DNA test, Bridget bails immediately. Oh, she also finds the time to drop into the law chambers to inform Mark about the pregnancy. He is absolutely delighted, by the way, and Bridget again doesn't mention the fact that there is a 50% chance that the baby might not be his. Anyway, Jack comes back after he's had time to think on the news and proceeds to have a "this is what we would have done if we'd had a second date" moment with Bridget to let her know that he's all in with becoming a father. She invites him to a work event and is surprised when Mark shows up as well. After a disastrous presentation that has her boss on the verge of firing her, things get even more complicated when Mark and Jack meet. And then at an Italian restaurant not far from the venue, she drops the news on them both. Jack is all ready to provide support. Mark is initially overwhelmed and walks away, but later shows up in time as well for the prenatal classes. And these two dunderheads proceed to try competing and one-upping each other throughout the entire process. Mark thinks that Jack is winning, but Jack, who is clearly aware of Bridget's history with Mark, lies about Bridget having had unprotected sex with him, and Mark walks away, thinking that, oh, for sure the baby must be Jack's. Eventually, Jack tells Bridget the truth, and when she goes in search of Mark, she sees Camilla at his apartment and assumes that they are now together. She's sad and depressed. To make matters worse, she's quit her job as well, loses her ATM card, and locks herself out of her apartment whilst it's raining. Bridget Jones is not having a good day. But then, Mark Darcy, aka Prince Charming, shows up. He gets her up to her apartment, and when she brings it up, he tells her that Camilla only came around to get the last of her stuff. Whilst talking, Bridget's water breaks, and Mark halfway carries her to the hospital. Jack, who was called whilst they're on their way, also rushes in, and together they both carry her in. Mark, though, is the one that Bridget turns to for support, and Jack is able to see the clear bond between the two of them after the baby is born, and all of Bridget's family and friends show up to see the newborn. Dr. Rollins has the two men come in for the DNA test. A year later, Bridget marries Mark, who it turns out is the father. Jack's the best man and is happy for the two of them. And there is a newspaper with news that Daniel Cleaver has been found alive after all. And that is where the movie ends. Like I said earlier, of all the 3 Bridget Jones films I've watched so far, Bridget Jones's Baby is my favorite. Sometimes the jokes make me facepalm, but unlike the previous 2 films, it didn't feel like we were laughing at Bridget's expense every 2 seconds, nor did it feel like it existed to humiliate her at every turn. It was mostly a good film, except for when it falls yet again into old territory that's as familiar as an old shoe at this point. Namely, this film tries to once again convince us that Mark Darcy is the perfect match for Bridget, and I am not buying it. Now, that is not to say that I think that Jack Quant is the one either. Clearly, he is not. The character of Jack exists to love bomb Bridget within seconds of meeting her in a way that just had me screaming, "You're doing too much way too fast" at my screen. So yeah, I wasn't a fan of him at all. No, clearly Jack as a character existed to serve as a contrast to Mark Darcy as a love interest, to show that what Bridget has always needed is the calm, steadying presence of Mark, the person she's had such history with and who understands her in a way that Jack does not. And honestly, if this film hadn't started by informing us that these 2 lovebirds broke up sometime between the second film and this one, I might have bought it. Unfortunately, however, they did break up. And Bridget's reason for why she initially didn't want to go back to Mark was pretty valid. he was never really there. She explained that it felt like she put in way more effort into their relationship than he did, and she was not willing to go down that path again. And she would have walked away if she hadn't gotten pregnant. And there is just something about that storyline that makes me so angry. Because it seemed like all her objections, all her fears, all her concerns all vanished straight into the air the minute the baby showed up. Bridget got baby brain, and everything that she was a bit cautious about went up into the wind because she was going to be a mother. Something that she absolutely wanted, and that to me was what Mark Darcy got to reap the benefit of. And before you say, but Noria, Mark did show that he was going to be there for Bridget. He tossed away his cell phone at the end, didn't he? To that I will say, yeah, so that was one time. If we follow through with what Bridget Jones as a franchise has consistently shown us, is that Mark Darcy does do the big moments well. I'm not going to take that away from him. Whether it's him saving her from a Thai prison or deciding to give up a job in New York to be with her, he does do the big moments, the big declarations of, I'm here for you, Bridget, very well. But Bridget's letter and note was about the little moments, the times when he isn't present for anniversaries, when she can't surprise him because work would suddenly show up or he's cancelling plans on her, when she needs him and he isn't there. Now, I'm not saying that any of that is Mark's fault, mind you, or that he's a terrible boyfriend. He isn't. Clearly, he's a decent guy. It's just she needs someone who is always there, and Mark Darcy just isn't. Plus, I can't be the only person who remembers that back in Bridget Jones' Edge of Reason, she and Mark could never agree on how they would raise their children. And yet now that the baby's here, I kept waiting for that conversation to come back up. Especially considering the fact that it is fundamental to the problems that led to Bridget breaking up with him in the first place in that film. Clearly, if her concern has always been that she's giving way too much in their relationship to Mark and Mark isn't there, wouldn't the situation be exacerbated by a child? Especially one who is a son. I mean, he was talking of sending their son to boarding school, to Eton, a decade prior. Has that changed, or is Bridget now okay with that? A lot of the conversations that ideally they should have seems to be swept away in the joy of, I'm 43 and now I have a baby, and even though I'm almost geriatric according to the film. And it just, I don't know. I guess considering that this is the third film, considering that it's been a decade since we were first introduced to Bridget Jones, considering that she seems calmer now and way more mature now, I guess I had high expectations that was going to carry through with regards how this sudden pregnancy storyline would be navigated. It seems weird to me that the depth of such a conversation was reserved for when it was a pregnancy scare and the stakes weren't high, and now that it's the real deal, none of that discussion point pops up. It's like I said in the title of the video, it's almost like her brain was filled with baby and all her objections and concerns went out of the window because, Mark Darcy. To me, it's like he baby trapped her or something. Because now, she's okay with everything. But hey, maybe that's just me. And your stance on things are a bit or a lot different from mine. I would as always love to hear your thoughts and opinions. So please drop them down in the comments. Like this video if you watch this far and haven't done so yet. Share this if you want. Support me on Patreon if you can. And until tomorrow's video, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.